In a world without electricity, air conditioning, or even fans, how did medieval people survive the blazing heat of summer? Thick stone walls, shady courtyards, and ancient wisdom-shaped homes that could stay cool even in the hottest months. Today, we're uncovering the forgotten secrets of medieval cooling, how simple design, clever habits, and nature itself kept homes comfortable without modern technology. This is the story of how medieval homes stayed cool and what we can still learn from them today. When we imagine medieval life, we often picture cold stone castles, drafty great halls, and roaring hearth fires. But summer came for them, 2 long, sweltering days that baked the land, thickened the air, and made even the strongest seek shelter from the relentless sun. Yet medieval people didn't have fans, electric coolers, or air-conditioned rooms. Their survival depended on clever architecture, traditional wisdom, and a profound understanding of nature. They knew how to harness shade, manage airflow, and build homes that stayed surprisingly cool even in the fiercest heat. Life, after all, demanded it. Without proper cooling, food spoiled faster, illnesses spread more easily, and tempers frayed. Livestock suffered, crops wilted, and the simple act of getting through a hot afternoon could be exhausting. Medieval builders learned not just to endure the heat, but to design against it. The secret started with the materials. Stone was king. In regions where it was available, medieval builders favored thick stone walls, not just for defense, but for temperature control. Stone absorbed heat slowly during the day and released it even more slowly at night. While the outside baked under the summer sun, the inside of a stone house remained cool and dim, a pocket of relief from the oppressive heat. Where stone was scarce, builders turned to wattle and daub, clay, or earth-packed walls, materials that likewise buffered against temperature swings. Mud and straw, dried under the sun, could form walls that trapped cool night air and kept it longer into the day. Then there was the way homes were positioned. In medieval villages, houses weren't placed randomly. Builders carefully considered the path of the sun, the direction of prevailing winds, and the landscape's natural features. Houses were often aligned east-west, with the narrow sides facing into the rising and setting sun, minimizing the surface area exposed to the fiercest light. Trees, vines, and even earth mounds were used strategically to cast shade onto walls during the hottest parts of the day. In wealthier manors and castles, courtyards were a crucial feature. Enclosed by high walls, courtyards could trap cool night air and release it gently during the day. Fountains, gardens, and even simple pools were used not just for beauty, but to add moisture to the air, softening the harsh dryness of summer. Inside, design details made a difference. Windows were small and often deeply recessed, especially in earlier medieval architecture. This wasn't just for defense, it limited the amount of direct sunlight pouring into rooms. In warmer climates, windows were sometimes covered not with glass, but with oiled parchment or thin cloth, diffusing light and allowing ventilation while keeping out heat. The thick walls, small openings, and shaded positioning all worked together to create an interior environment that, while dim, remained comfortably cooler than the searing air outside. Of course, people themselves adapted their habits, too. Daily routines shifted with the sun. Heavy labor was done in the early morning and late afternoon. Midday was for rest, a quiet period known across medieval Europe, particularly in hotter regions, when streets emptied, workshops fell silent, and homes became sanctuaries of shade and stillness. Cooling off wasn't just about surviving the day, it was woven into the very fabric of medieval life. In the next part, we'll step deeper inside these homes and discover how architecture, airflow, and clever design kept medieval families cool through the hottest summers, long before anyone dreamed of electricity. Step to the heavy door of a medieval home, and you'd notice it immediately, the shift. From the sun's harsh brightness to the gentle, dim embrace of thick walls and cooler air. It wasn't magic. It was ancient engineering, built on generations of observing the rhythms of heat, wind, and stone. One of the keys to medieval cooling was the use of thermal mass. Thick stone walls, clay-packed timber frames, and even brickwork had an important role. They absorbed heat during the hottest hours of the day, preventing it from rushing into the living spaces. Instead of baking immediately when the sun rose high, the walls absorbed heat slowly, buffering the interior. Then, as the evening cooled, those same walls released the stored heat, just in time for chilly nights. It created a natural balance. Cooler days, warmer nights, all without touching a switch. But medieval builders didn't stop there. They designed homes to breathe with the seasons. In warmer months, people opened their windows, but not wide and gaping like modern houses might. Instead, medieval windows were small, narrow, and strategically placed. Some even had adjustable wooden shutters or lattice designs that controlled how much air and light could pass through. The goal wasn't just ventilation, it was managed airflow. By allowing small streams of air to circulate through the shaded interiors, builders created gentle, natural breezes inside the house. Hot air, being lighter, rose upward and escaped through higher vents or gaps in the upper walls or thatched roofs, while cooler air slipped in from lower openings. This ancient method of passive ventilation kept interior spaces from becoming stifling. In castles and wealthier homes, larger rooms often featured high, vaulted ceilings. These weren't just for grandeur, they served a cooling purpose. Hot air collected in the upper reaches of the room, leaving the lower spaces cooler and more comfortable for those inside. Stone floors also played a role. Cool underfoot even on the hottest days, they made the living areas more tolerable without any mechanical help. Some manor houses and castles even included underground spaces, cellars, storage rooms, or undercrofts partially dug into the earth. These subterranean rooms maintained a steady, cool temperature year-round. In summer, they became essential spaces for storing food, aging wine, and even escaping the worst of the heat when needed. Simple interior design choices also helped. Heavy tapestries and thick wall hangings weren't just decorative or meant to keep the cold out in winter, they also insulated rooms in summer, reducing the speed at which heat entered the stone walls. Floor coverings like rushes, straw mats, and later woven rugs added another layer of insulation against both cold and heat, helping to moderate the feeling underfoot. And perhaps most importantly, medieval people knew how to live with the heat rather than fight it. On the hottest days, meals were often cooked outdoors or in separate kitchen buildings, reducing the heat burden inside the living quarters. Activities shifted to shaded courtyards, gardens, or breezeways. Heavy garments were traded for lighter linen clothes, and the rhythms of daily life adjusted naturally to the sun's rise and fall. There were no fans, no freon, no humming machines. There was only stone, timber, earth, and the deep, practical wisdom of how to use them. In the next part, we'll explore how nature itself, trees, water, gardens, and design helped medieval homes stay cool and why even the landscaping around these houses played a critical role in surviving the heat. In the Middle Ages, builders and homeowners understood something we sometimes forget today. Nature could be your enemy or your greatest ally. When it came to surviving summer heat, medieval people didn't just build their homes for cooling, they shaped the world around them to help. The simplest and most powerful ally was the tree. In medieval villages, towns, and manorial estates, trees weren't just scenery. They were living umbrellas. Builders knew to plant or preserve large shade trees near homes, particularly on the south and west sides, where the afternoon sun was most brutal. Oaks, elms, chestnuts, and linden trees, giants with sprawling canopies, cast deep, cooling shadows that could lower surrounding temperatures by several degrees. These trees shielded walls and roofs from direct sunlight during the hottest parts of the day, keeping interiors cooler without lifting a finger. And because they shed their leaves in winter, they allowed precious sunlight to reach homes during the colder months. It was natural, seasonal climate control, centuries before the term even existed. Gardens played a role too. In many medieval households, especially wealthier ones, courtyard gardens weren't just for beauty or food production, they helped regulate temperature. Walled gardens trapped cool air, especially at night. Dense greenery, low shrubs, and carefully placed fountains created miniature microclimates where air stayed moist and temperatures remained lower. Fountains, ponds, and even simple stone basins of water were placed deliberately around living areas to cool the air. The evaporation of water naturally absorbed heat, softening the harshness of the summer sun. Castles and manors often featured garden courtyards with central fountains, not just to show off wealth, but to create a cooling heart for the estate. Vines and climbing plants were another clever trick. Grapevines, ivy, roses, and honeysuckle were trained up walls and trellises to provide an extra layer of living shade. A vine-covered wall might be several degrees cooler than a bare stone one. In some places, woven mats of greenery were hung over windows or balconies to block sunlight while still allowing breezes to flow through. Even the streets themselves were part of the cooling system. In medieval towns, narrow, winding streets weren't just accidents of haphazard growth, they were practical defenses against both invaders and summer heat. Tall buildings close together shaded the alleys below. The twisting paths reduced the amount of direct sunlight that could pour down at midday, keeping ground temperatures lower. Walking through a medieval town on a hot day, you could move from patch to patch of shade, avoiding the worst of the heat. In warmer climates, such as southern Spain or Italy, whitewashed walls became a critical adaptation. Coated in lime plaster, these bright surfaces reflected sunlight rather than absorbing it, helping to keep houses cooler. Even in northern regions, lighter-colored materials were sometimes used for the same reason. Nature wasn't something to conquer. It was something to work with, shaped, honored, and adapted. Medieval builders and homeowners recognized that their survival, comfort, and even prosperity depended on designing with the land, not just on top of it. In the next part, we'll explore how daily life rhythms, clothing choices, and clever social customs helped people personally cope with the heat long before anyone had even heard of air conditioning. Even the best-designed medieval home couldn't block out the summer heat entirely. When the air grew thick and heavy, when the sun baked the stones and dust danced across dry fields, medieval people had to do what we often struggle to do today. They adapted themselves, not their environment. Life shifted naturally with the seasons, and the hottest days were no exception. One of the most obvious changes was in daily rhythms. Across medieval Europe, it was understood that midday, when the sun was highest and the heat most punishing, was not the time for labor. Fields were worked early in the morning and late into the evening. Markets opened at dawn and closed before noon. In cities and villages, life slowed dramatically in the afternoon. In southern regions like Spain, Italy, and parts of France, entire communities embraced a form of siesta, a rest period when streets emptied, homes closed their shutters, and people retreated into the coolest parts of their dwellings. Work resumed later, when shadows lengthened and temperatures softened. Even in northern Europe, though the tradition wasn't as formalized, similar habits of midday rest developed during the hottest months. Clothing was another important adaptation. Forget the heavy woolen garments of winter. In summer, medieval people wore lighter, looser clothing, usually made of linen, which was breathable and helped wick moisture away from the body. Wealthier individuals might have finer weaves, while peasants wore rougher homespun. But the principle was the same. Loose, airy layers kept the skin cooler than tight or heavy garments. Hats, veils, and coifs, made from linen or light wool, were used to protect heads from direct sun, particularly during outdoor work. Wide-brimmed straw hats became common among farmers and travelers. Cloaks or hooded garments, worn loosely, could actually help shield the skin from burning while trapping a layer of cooler air underneath. Inside the home, sleeping arrangements changed too. In the hottest months, people might move their sleeping spaces. Instead of dense, stuffy chambers deep inside the house, they would set up bedding closer to the courtyard, near open windows, or even in semi-outdoor spaces like galleries or roofed terraces. Sleeping outdoors on balconies or in enclosed gardens was not uncommon, especially in southern climates. In castles and manors, stone floors became prized for more than just durability. They were a cool refuge. Some people even moved bedding onto stone floors during the worst heat to escape the warmth of wooden upper stories. Food and drink played a role as well. During summer, medieval diets lightened. Heavy stews and roasted meats gave way to cold dishes, fresh fruits, salads, and cooled drinks like ale, cider, or herbal infusions. Water from wells or springs, if clean and safe, provided critical hydration, though in many places, beer or small ale, a weak, fermented drink, was safer to consume. Communal activities shifted into the cooler evening hours. Feasts, festivals, and markets often began in the late afternoon and continued after sunset, when breezes returned and lanterns lit the winding streets. Above all, medieval people had an attitude we could still learn from: acceptance. They didn't expect to be perfectly cool. They didn't fight the season. Instead, they designed their lives around it, rising early, resting midday, layering lightly, staying shaded, and celebrating the return of evening breezes. For them, the heat wasn't a battle to win. It was a part of the world to live with, to respect, and to endure. In the final part, we'll step back and see how all of these small choices, from architecture to habits, created a sustainable, natural system of cooling that has lessons even for our modern world. As centuries passed, medieval towns grew into cities. Castles crumbled into ruins. Technology marched forward with inventions that reshaped the way people lived and cooled their homes. But if we look closely at the homes that have survived, we can still see the echoes of an ancient wisdom, a knowledge of how to work with nature rather than against it. Medieval homes didn't fight the heat with brute force. They didn't demand absolute comfort at all hours. They accepted that the sun would rise and scorch the earth, and they planned around it. It began with materials: thick stone, cool earth, dense thatch. Walls were made to breathe and insulate, not seal off life. Homes were shaded naturally by trees, vines, and clever orientation to the landscape. Windows were tools, not gaping voids, small, manageable, and used to guide air like a sailor steers a ship. The very shape of villages and cities reflected this mindset. Winding streets offered pockets of shade. Courtyards captured cool air. Roofs overhung walkways not just to keep off rain, but to shelter against midday heat. Even the marketplaces, bustling with trade, often nestled under arcades or wooden awnings, protecting shoppers and merchants alike from the sun's fury. Inside, life adapted effortlessly. People didn't demand cold. They sought shade, breeze, and rhythm. They rose with the cool of dawn, paused when the heat grew fierce, and returned to work when evening softened the day. Meals shifted. Clothes shifted. Even sleeping spaces shifted. No grand technology was needed, only awareness, adaptation, and patience. And because of this approach, medieval communities lived sustainably for hundreds of years, without a single humming air conditioner, without blackouts or overloaded grids, without sealing themselves away from the seasons. Their world stayed alive with the rhythms of light, wind, and stone. Today, as modern cities struggle with rising temperatures and growing energy demands, some of that lost wisdom is slowly being rediscovered. Architects study passive cooling again. Urban planners revisit the importance of shade trees, courtyards, and narrow streets. Builders are learning from the past, realizing that the best solutions may not be the newest, but the oldest. The medieval way wasn't perfect. Life was hard in many ways. But when it came to surviving heat without machines, their world was a masterpiece of natural adaptation. So next time you step into an old stone house on a blazing summer day and feel that unexpected, welcoming coolness, remember, it's not just thick walls or clever design you're feeling. It's the touch of a forgotten knowledge, still breathing, still offering shelter, after all these centuries. Because real comfort, it turns out, isn't always about conquering nature. Sometimes, it's about listening to it and learning to live within its embrace. Medieval homes didn't conquer the heat, they worked with it. What part of their cooling secrets surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to discover more hidden wisdom from the past. Thanks for watching and stay cool, the medieval way.